Test. Test. Yeah.
Thank you, James.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everyone for staying after the luncheon, and also to thank people in hospitality and the Green Committee for putting the luncheon on, specifically Amy Jackson and also Lucinda and Lisa Dawn. So thank you very much for coming to hear environmental scientist Lindsay Cross today. For me, it's like a dream come true because I'm very interested in the environment and its health. And no one knows as much about that subject and what is going on in Florida than Lindsay Cross. My name is Lisa Bean, and along with Alan Nitzman, I am a founding member of the Green Team. Here at UU St. Pete, we are a multi-issue congregation. We live holistically, guided by our core principles. And for me, respect and even reverence for the interconnected web of life, of which we are all a part, is a guiding principle that is very near and dear to my heart. For me, this is personal. For more than 25 years ago, I was living in Boston, and I had the good fortune to go behind the scenes at Harvard and MIT when climate change was first being presented. And I listened for maybe 2 months of different lectures from top scientists from around the world. I could just tell you that I was shocked, transfixed, and changed forever by the overwhelming truth of it. Our unique planet, our great creator and sustainer Earth, is in crisis so profound that I became nearly immobilized with fear over what is to come, grief over what has already been lost, and yes, guilt for my part in it. But as the years passed, I had to triumph over these negative emotions. I needed to dispel them and replace them with a deep sense of gratitude, love, and courage. We all need strong, positive emotions to move forward. I came to see that if we think globally but act locally out of a sense of gratitude, we really can make a positive difference. So now, as a member of UU St. Pete, I consider my purpose here as working to preserve our health and our home in creation. And that is something we all can do, and many of us already do it every day. The Green Team at UU St. Pete will be working with FAST, our collaborative of over 50 churches, on continuing to advocate for water quality issues and affordable housing, as well as joining with other institutions and groups like SOUL to promote environmental justice. As far as thinking globally, you don't have to go to Harvard. We now have the new Patel College for Global Sustainability at USF in Tampa. Who knew? Things like this are popping up all over. We just don't hear about them. And what about thinking locally? One organization providing hands-on help in our own front yard is SOUL. And we have 2 members from SOUL today, actually 3 because I just joined, and they're down here, and they will talk to you later. SOUL is an acronym for Stewards of the Urban Lakes. Its volunteer army just finished a giant cleanup of Mirror Lake. Please take a walk around Mirror Lake today. You'll be happy to see our neighborhood turtles, snowy egrets, ducks, blue herons, migrating birds, songbirds, and other aquatic life no longer having to fight pollution and invasive weeds. SOUL has restored their natural habitat and refreshed their nesting grounds just in time for spring. So tomorrow is Earth Day, and as a kickoff for our planet, Lindsay Cross is here to tell us what else is going on in St. Petersburg in regard to environmental stewardship. With a degree in environmental health, and as both an accomplished environmental scientist and a Florida State House representative, Lindsay knows who is doing what and what opportunities there are to help preserve our health and our home in creation. This is a completely nonpartisan meeting. The environment affects us all. So without further ado, please help me give a warm welcome to Lindsay Cross.
Is this on? Oh, it is. It's already on. Perfect. Well, I was hoping to be up in the pulpit because I've never spoken the pulpit before, but I think this is nicer that we can see each other a little bit better this way. So I wanted to, first of all, thank Lisa for inviting me to speak to you today, and for Reverend Ben, and for everyone here at the church. It's really an honor to be here as we begin to celebrate Earth Day, and we've had many activities around the community to celebrate Earth Day. And I am Lindsay Cross. I'm a state representative here in St. Petersburg. I live just about 2 miles away down the street from Trader Joe's. So that's my part of the community. And I've been here for 20 years. I bought my house in 2004 and fell in love with St. Petersburg and the community here, and have been just blessed to be able to pursue my passion, which is the environment and protecting the environment for our people and for our wild critters and our ecosystems. So I wanted to share a little bit about my background, what led me to come here today, and then talk about what I think are some of the most important issues affecting our state and our local community. I'll share a little bit about how that intersects with politics, particularly at the state level, without getting into politics and partisanship, and then some things that are opportunities for us to do here, and then we'll also have time for Q&A at the end. Sound good? Okay. So I was born in Detroit, Michigan, actually in Lansing, Michigan. Both of my parents were Michigan State graduates, and they were both teachers. They actually met at a teacher conference in Lansing. My dad had recently broken his back. He was barefoot water skiing and fell and broke his back. So he had crutches in the trunk of his car. He went on to be a very accomplished runner and marathon runner, but my mom said, I should have known that first day that he was going to have injuries his whole life because he had crutches in the back of his car. But they were both working in middle schools in the Lansing area. We eventually moved to the Detroit area, where my dad was the principal of one of the large high schools in suburban Detroit, and my mom continued to teach at the late elementary and early middle school level. So from a very young age, education was incredibly important in our schools. I also knew that if I got in trouble at school, I would get in even more trouble at home. My parents were not going to come bail me out from the principal's office because my dad was a principal, and he knew that, you know, how important it was for my brother and I to be good students, and that would be the pathway to a good career and a good life. I first heard about the environment actually through my mom. She became a gifted and talented teacher and had the flexibility to teach lessons that were interesting to her. So when there was a King Tut exhibition that came to the Detroit History Museum, she did a unit on Egypt with her students. And then similarly, Earth Day was something. They were about to celebrate a big anniversary of Earth Day. And so my mom had her students learn about the origins of Earth Day and what it meant to us today. And so whenever she did these lessons, she would come back and she would share what she was learning with my brother and me, and we would get engaged in it as well. And so that's when I first learned that for someone like myself who loved being outside and loved animals, that there were other things that I could do besides being a veterinarian or a dolphin trainer, which is what I thought, 8-year-old me thought I would do. This is a time where acid rain was very prevalent when we were learning about the destruction of the rainforest. Acid rain, we have eliminated most cases of that, but we still continue to see destruction of the Amazon rainforest. But there's so many other headlines, environmentally related and other issues, that we don't hear about that as much. But learning about Earth Day and things like the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency and the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act, those were transformational for me. I loved science, and I had fantastic science teachers. At my school, I was able to do anatomy and physiology, so I dissected cats when I was in high school, and I even went on a 2-week tropical ecology trip with 2 of my teachers to Belize, to the rainforest and to the coral reef, staying on an island. And that really was it for me. I knew that I would dedicate my life to protecting the environment, and was actually able to give a speech to my senior class and talked about the importance of passion. We hear this term a lot. I'm not taking credit for it, but I remember using that in a speech, and no one was talking about careers as being a passion. But I encouraged all of my classmates to find something that they were passionate about, and felt fortunate that I had already found mine. I went to college at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado, where I earned a bachelor's in environmental health. And I was very intentional about that degree because I wanted to understand the connection between humans and the environment, because there's so much intersection, the things that we do, how it affects our natural environment, and in turn, how the natural environment affects us. I got to learn about things like waterborne illnesses. We don't talk about E. coli here as much, or Giardia, but out west particularly, those are things you know that you never drink out of a stream when you're hiking, because you'll probably pay for it a couple days later. But getting to learn about that strong connection between humans and the environment. After college, I made my way to the Tampa Bay area, first in Clearwater. And one of the reasons that I chose Florida is because I had a history of coming here with my family. My grandparents lived in Wildwood, and my aunt and uncle and 2 cousins lived in Oldsmar. They were living on Lake Tarpon, where I learned how to water ski. Never barefoot water skied like my dad. I learned my lesson through him. But we would spend our Christmas vacations, our spring breaks. We were smart enough not to come in the summer, but I grew up going to Clearwater Beach and loved that and loved the marine environment. So when I made my way here in 2001, I eventually made my way to St. Petersburg and just fell in love with it and have been here ever since. The first real job I got here in the area was at an organization called the Tampa Bay Estuary Program. And it's one that you may have heard of, and I could not have gotten more fortunate to start out my career there. What is so wonderful about the Estuary Program is that it's all built on partnerships. It was a result of, up until just a few years ago, there were 28 national estuary programs around the country. And these are place-based organizations that have a mission of using science to make decisions, to develop community-based comprehensive management plans. So that means they take the scientists, the academics, and people in the community to identify the resources that are most important and some ways to improve those resources. So in the Tampa Bay region, some of the priorities were improving water quality and restoring seagrasses. And that organization has a policy board made up of elected officials from the member governments surrounding Tampa Bay, which at the time included Pinellas, Hillsborough, and Manatee County, and the cities of St. Petersburg, Tampa, and Clearwater. They've now added Pasco there because some of the watershed, essentially the land area that drains into Tampa Bay, some of it extends as far north as Pasco County. But Tampa Bay is the largest open water estuary that we have in the state. It close to 400 square miles at high tide, and the watershed that surrounds it, I believe, is 4 times, it's about 1,600 square miles. So it's a massive water body. It is a regional asset that we have here, and actually 1 in 5 jobs in the Tampa Bay region is reliant on having not just the bay here for transportation, but having a clean and healthy Tampa Bay. The Tampa Bay Estuary Program has been successful because it's used a collaborative approach that incorporated partners, not just at the governmental level and community members, but also industry, and brought people like Duke Energy and the TECO electric plants and the phosphate industry, brought them to the table to help be part of the solution. And so it truly is a model for what we should be doing better at all levels of government and working collaboratively. I spent 14 years with the Tampa Bay Estuary Program and then moved on to 2 different nonprofits. I served as the executive director of the Florida Wildlife Corridor, which is a statewide organization that uses photography and art and film to inspire people to advocate for the protection of this land and water corridor. It extends from the base of the Florida Everglades down in Florida Bay, and this corridor goes all the way through the center of the state. Then it bifurcates in the northern Everglades. A portion of it goes up to the Georgia border, and then another portion goes along the Panhandle over to the Alabama border. All told, it's about 18,000 acres. That doesn't sound right, but or 18 million acres. We have about half of it that's already protected right now. Again, that is a vision, a strategic vision that was set with the input of scientists and community members who recognize that we need land and water, not just for our wildlife, but for our water supply and to support our health as humans and our access to nature, which is part of, our overall mental health and well-being here. I also spent 3 years at another statewide organization called Florida Conservation Voters, where I helped with many statewide campaigns to improve water quality and to limit roads and infrastructure that were going to be damaging to our community. One role that I was particularly proud of was helping to stop a project called the MCORs. We call them the Roads to Ruin. This was an idea to put 3 new large toll roads through some of the most pristine, undeveloped areas of our state, including portions of the Everglades, which is prime panther habitat, areas within the center of the state, which have many of our springs and our freshwater resources. And all told, these new toll roads would eat up tens of thousands of acres of undeveloped natural areas and farmland. So in a coalition with over 100 businesses across the state, we were able to attend these meetings and talk about why this was not the right thing for Florida. We have all heard the statistics that we have about 1,000 people moving to Florida every day. In my work as an environmental scientist now, I see that. I work and do some assessments over in Hillsborough County where they are developing. It feels like every patch of green land is being developed. And so there's new roads, there's new water lines and infrastructure to support that growth. So the work that we did in the No Roads to Ruin Coalition, we're able to, at least for the time being, prevent those roads from going through some of our most sensitive and treasured natural parts of Florida. So that's a little bit about my professional background. I do work as a practicing environmental scientist right now for a consulting company and kind of split my time between doing field work and looking out for things like the endangered gopher tortoise, which we're losing much of that habitat, and also doing a lot of science communication. So I kind of specialize in working with community members and elected officials and business leaders to make science understandable and engaging so that we have more people who are committed to finding solutions and understand why these things are important. And throughout that time, I've been able to meet just some of the most, I think, committed and inspiring people who are working on those type of efforts. People like Carlton Ward Jr., a wildlife photographer from right here in the Tampa Bay area who started the Florida Wildlife Corridor. People down in South Florida who have continued the mission of protecting the Florida Everglades and the River of Grass and being able to get out and see those resources and why they're so important. So at a state level, I would say the 3 most important things that we have to contend with right now are water, energy, and development. Our water quality and how we can make sure that we have clean water to drink and also water that is safe for fish and wildlife to use, but also for us as people to swim in, really centers on preventing pollution in the first place. There are numerous sources of pollution, but our most important or our largest source right now is non-point source pollution. Back in the 70s and the 80s, when we were starting to implement things through the Clean Water Act, it was much easier to go after some of the big pollution sources because they were usually a pipe that you could see discharging some nasty chemicals or untreated water into a water body like Tampa Bay. When this organization, the Tampa Bay Estuary Program, was being organized, there had been just a steady decline in the water quality because there was untreated sewage and other waste and runoff that was being discharged directly into Tampa Bay. There were floating mats of algae, green, gooey algae, and homeowners in Bayshore Boulevard actually reported that their silverware, their silver would tarnish because of the noxious odors from the decaying sewage and the algae that was in the water. But we had the Clean Water Act and an important piece of legislation at the state level, which was called the Grizzle Fig Act. There was a group called Minnesota 88, which was a concerned group of citizens that recognized the importance of Tampa Bay and wanted to get back to something that was clean, that was fishable, that was swimmable. These are some of the adjectives that EPA uses to try to bring water bodies up to cleaner conditions. And so this group began advocating to their local elected officials and their state officials, and a representative and a senator from this area were able to pass a bipartisan bill called the Grizzle Fig Act that required better pollution treatment from the wastewater treatment plants within the Tampa Bay area. And it was a very expensive proposition. It cost billions of dollars for our cities and our counties to comply with this legislation by creating more advanced wastewater treatment plants and using reclaimed water as a solution. But over the course of several years, we're able to meet those standards, and as a result of that, we slowly began to see the bay come back to life. About 8 years ago, we recorded more seagrass in Tampa Bay than we had in the 1950s. And that was an indication that the work that we were doing, the partnerships, as well as the commitment from groups like the phosphate industries and the Port of Tampa Bay to be more careful to reduce spills and some of these toxins that get into the water. But water pollution continues to be a problem. You probably recall a couple years ago when we had that massive breach at Piney Point, and we had highly polluted wastewater that got into lower Tampa Bay, and the equivalent amount of nitrogen, which is the nutrient that we look at primarily in the Tampa Bay area, is what's called the limiting nutrient. That means that if you have, you need some amount of that for plant life to grow, but when you have too much, you start to get this overgrowth of algae, which smothers, it prevents the sunlight, it causes death of seagrasses, it can lead to manatee starvation and death from other fish and wildlife. But we saw the equivalent of 1 year's worth of nitrogen being discharged into lower Tampa Bay in just 10 days. So if you think of trying to eat all of the meals that you would over the course of a year in 10 days, so I'll give you until the end of April, and let's see how you feel. So we know that spill in Piney Point led to algae blooms. It helped to exacerbate a red tide, and if you were living here at the time, you would have seen the floating, the dead fish, and the dolphins and the manatee that we saw in the bay, as well as parts of the Gulf Coast. So those fights are not over. There's still the potential for spills from our phosphate industry, and there was just a leak in a liner of one of the facilities in Polk County in central Florida just about a month ago. But making sure that we are continuing to be vigilant about our water quality is one of the most important things. The non-point source pollution that I mentioned, that's the runoff that we have from our roads, from our yards, from our urban and suburban areas, as well as what's in our air. Atmospheric deposition is the term for essentially particles that fall down from air pollution and get incorporated into our water. So the exhausts that we have, the pollutants from our vehicles, as well as our industrial facilities, our power plants, and other industry, when that gets into the air, it eventually falls down in the form of rainfall or in dust particles, and can be a significant form of water pollution as well. So anything that we're doing to clean up our fleets by shifting to electric vehicles, having cars and transportation fleets that are more efficient is not only going to improve our air quality, but it's going to improve our water quality. From a local level, our runoff is really determined by how well we're able to manage that stormwater and how much we can reduce the stuff that gets into there in the first place. So improving the way we manage our own homes and yards by reducing fertilizer and pesticide use is one of the key things that we can do as homeowners or as people, maybe if you have a business with a yard. And I'll touch on some more of those things in a little bit. But runoff has become one of our major sources of pollution, and we just passed a piece of legislation this year that would update some of the stormwater rules. So it's going to result in larger stormwater ponds, which are it's something that developers don't necessarily want to do, because if the ponds are larger, that means that there's less land available for them to develop. But if we can't keep our water clean, we know that there's a direct correlation with our public health and how valuable it is and how attractive it is for people to want to live here. So it was a significant effort to get this stormwater, these rules updated and passed by the House and the Senate this year. And the hope is that with the implementation of those, some of the water will receive more treatment, and it will ultimately be cleaner when it gets discharged to places like Tampa Bay or the Gulf of Mexico. All right. So land energy production. Sure, thank you. Thank you, I appreciate that. Our energy production is also tied directly to the health of our communities. And what we've seen in recent years is that it's becoming more difficult for people to put rooftop solar on their homes. You may see some solar. We also have some efforts from the city of St. Petersburg and some of the other municipal governments to try to shift to more renewable energy. St. Pete and other governments around the state have committed to getting to 100% renewable energy over the next couple decades. But we also see that at the state level, there are forces that don't want that to happen, because if you get to 100% renewable, that means that you have to eliminate sources like oil and natural gas and coal. So preemptions are something that happens when a local government is doing something that the state doesn't like, and they often will make a rule that no one in the state can do that anymore. And so despite efforts to shift towards more renewable sources, we're seeing a backlash at the state level trying to preempt that. We are seeing more industrial solar fields throughout our state, which is important, but there's also valuable land that's being used for some of these large solar fields. I think of every rooftop as being untapped real estate that we should be using as much as we can. Amen. Yes. I have tried many times to put solar on my house, but because my energy footprint is relatively small and I have my roof is not the right orientation and I have big trees there, everyone tells me you're not a good candidate for solar. And it really breaks my heart because I want to have solar on my roof, but it has not been the right investment for me yet. But making sure that solar continues to be affordable for people and that they're able to sell back some of their energy back to the grid is something that we've been looking at really closely. A couple years ago, there was a bill in Tallahassee that would have changed that payment structure. So if someone is generating more energy than they're using, there's a certain price that they can sell it back to the power companies. And that was threatening. And so there was a bill that would significantly reduce the amount that people could get when they sold their energy back to the grid. Fortunately, that bill was vetoed by the governor, but usually bad ideas don't go away. They just kind of are buried for a little while, and then they rise from the dead. So that's something that we'll likely to see again. In the Tampa Bay area, we have had conversions of our coal-fired power plants to natural gas, which is a cleaner fuel, but it is still a non-renewable energy. It still emits pollution, and we know that there are accidents during drilling and transporting of things like oil and natural gas. And so really the future that we need to be looking to is renewable energy, primarily solar renewable energy. We're starting to see transfers of vehicle fleets to electric buses. If you guys have ridden the Sunrunner, that's electric. We're also making some of those conversions in the school buses within Pinellas County, and there has been federal settlement money from a Volkswagen settlement that's been able to come and help with some of that clean energy transition, and really trying to center some of that money into areas with the worst pollution, because we know that children are very susceptible to that, and we have urban areas across the state where having cleaner fleets is going to help children that have asthma and other respiratory conditions, and just make the air cleaner for all of us. So energy is something that we have to continue to look at, and making investments in renewable energy where we are able to. One of my favorite ways to reduce my carbon footprint is to walk and ride my bike as much as I can. I rode my bike here from my house, and yes, you can bike in a dress and you can bike in heels. You just have to be careful when you stop and when you get off. But I also try to use our public transportation as often as possible. So raise your hand if you've ridden the Sunrunner. Yeah, that's great. That's great. It's so comfortable, isn't it? Yeah. Committing to public transportation, even if it's a little bit less convenient and even if it takes a few more minutes, I think is something that we all need to be really cognizant about right now. PSTA, and particularly the Sunrunner, has been under attack. In the past couple months, there was a local bill that was trying to make some significant overhauls to PSTA, and they're looking really closely at the ridership, because they want that some people want that initiative to fail. And so the only way we're going to prove that it is something that's important and valuable to our community is for those of us that are able to commit to using it. Transportation is also an important issue when we look at the development that we're continuing to see. We all know that our skyline in St. Petersburg is changing, and we are increasing density. This may be something that you are supportive of. Maybe it's not your favorite thing, because it is adding to traffic. We are kind of in that awkward phase right now, almost like the awkward teenage years, where we don't have enough ridership for some of the mass transit that we would eventually like to see, but there's enough traffic that it's starting to become painful, and people are irritated, and they talk to me about that, about the traffic. But I believe that as we continue to have more development in St. Petersburg, we are going to have to make the accommodations that push us to more transit, because there's only so many parking lots that we can build and so many lanes that we can create before we eventually realize that having single occupancy vehicles is not the only way to get around the state. Hopefully with the expansion of Brightline from Miami over to Orlando, maybe we'll see something eventually over to Tampa, and I think that could be a real game changer for our community. Along the lines of development, I am actually a fan and a proponent of increased density in the right places in the right way. With 1,000 people moving to Florida every day, we don't have the luxury, particularly in Pinellas County, of using undeveloped lands and creating sprawling subdivisions that are not walkable, that are, require you to get into your car just to get to the nearest grocery store. But we continue to see that as the dominant type of development in our state. Our natural areas only are important for our wildlife, but undeveloped areas are what help to recharge our aquifer in our wetlands. And areas like cattle ranches and other agriculture and timber also play a really important role in helping with our food security and also supporting our aquifer by allowing that water to recharge on those areas. So when we're able to increase density and make communities that are more walkable, that have public transit options, the more we can protect some of those lands, and particularly areas like the Florida Wildlife Corridor. That's a vision for our state that we need to implement. About a decade ago, the University of Florida and Thousand Friends of Florida did some studies, and they called it the Florida 2030 and Water 2030, where they mapped out some different development scenarios of, development kind of business as usual, which is larger sprawling areas in undeveloped parts of the state. And then they also mapped scenarios where we have slight increases in density, and we're able to save thousands of acres of natural areas, protect many of our important springs and our spring sheds, and retain areas that our wildlife species need. So in St. Petersburg, we really don't have a choice in how we develop, because up is the only way that we can go. But I think having thoughtful conversations with your leaders at the city and at the state level about density and the type of development that we are approving and the zoning that's happening in our communities is going to be really critical, because once we take a wetland and turn it into a parking lot or a subdivision, we're not going to get that wetland back. So the most important thing is having those protections in place. There have been some changes in federal law related to how we permit the destruction of wetlands. And you may have heard something about the 404 permitting, but wetland permitting is something that is overseen at the federal level with some involvement from the state. In recent years, the state took over a lot of that authority and wanted to do most of it themselves. We found that the state did not have enough people employed to handle all of those permits, and so rather than make it a faster process, it actually bogged things down, and I think will lead to more wetland destruction if we don't have some of the oversight through the Endangered Species Act and through our partners up at the federal level. So that's something that we're continuing to look at because there have been challenges to that assumption at the state level. So we may see that revert back to more of a cooperative partnership between the state and the feds. I mentioned that I was the executive director of the Florida Wildlife Corridor, and that is another way that we can protect our most valuable areas, with the understanding that we can't protect every acre, but having lands that are connected to one another and create corridors, whether they're half a mile wide or tens of miles wide, allow animals like panthers and black bears and other highly mobile species to be able to move throughout the state and have enough area to roam, to find food, to find mates. A male Florida panther needs about 200 square miles for its home range. And so if you think it's difficult for you to, find some place to eat in Applebee's, or, when you were dating, if you thought it was hard to find someone to partner with, think of that Florida panther that needs 200 square miles to do that. So those are a couple of the key things that I see at our state level, but at our local level, I'd really like to uplift a lot of the work that we're doing in St. Petersburg. Our city council has taken on many of these initiatives in trying to be the best stewards they can be of our area. We have active programs to plant trees. Our city has converted some of our buildings to have solar panels on the roofs, has electric vehicle charging stations that they're implementing and installing in new locations, and looking at infrastructure and making sure that we are updating our sewer systems, that our wastewater treatment plants have the capacity that they need for our growing population. And that is going to continue to take investments through us, through our water bills, through our taxes. But hopefully, at the state level, we'll be able to bring some money down cooperatively to help with some of those efforts. Those are some of the things that I'm really focused on at the state level, is making sure that we're strategic with how we invest our water money. We put several $100 million into water quality improvement projects each year, and I'm hoping that we have a more systematic and scientific-based way for deciding what projects get funded and understanding statewide what level of treatment we're at, so that we can eventually bring every wastewater treatment plant up to the highest level possible, so that our receiving water bodies are cleaner, that we have more fish, and that we have waters that we can swim and fish in. Also at the city level, at city and regional level, we have incredible partners and incredible nonprofits. Lisa mentioned Soul, Stewards of Our Urban Lakes, and Margaret, you're here representing. That is a new organization that is just fantastic. Mirror Lake has been transformed. Crescent Lake, we're able to remove a lot of the invasives. I was just in the Meadow Lawn community a couple weeks ago and helped with some of the planting around that area. But groups like Soul and Keep Pinellas Beautiful are out in the community literally every weekend with cleanups or ways for you to get involved. Some of the other organizations that are very active include the Tampa Bay Estuary Program, which has Give a Day for the Bay events, and they also have mini grants where they give community grants out to schools and other organizations once a year, usually up to $5,000 for things like native planting, pollinator gardens, cleanups of lakes and stormwater areas. So that's a government entity that distributes money from the sale of the tarpon tag. If you've seen that green license plate with a tarpon jumping up in the water, all of the proceeds from that go back to the community through this mini grant program. Yeah. You've probably heard of Tampa Bay Watch, and if you've gone to Fort DeSoto, you've seen their beautiful facility. Tampa Bay Watch is helping with a lot of the hands-on restoration and putting oyster domes and oyster gardens, as well as planting salt marsh and other native habitats on our beaches and within our water bodies. They also do fantastic programs in the summer, school camps for kids, and get out into the schools throughout the year, and programs called Bay Grasses and Classes, where kids actually get to plant, to grow this marsh grass in their classrooms, and then at the end of that, they get to go plant it at a local park or natural area. Yeah, so Tampa Bay Watch is a great one. And another one is called Tampa Bay Water Keepers. And Tampa Bay Water Keepers is playing another important role in that they're not only looking out for the water quality, but they, along with a group called the Center for Biological Diversity, is actually committed to suing polluters or suing governments when they are breaking the laws and endangering our water bodies. And that's an important piece, because you as a citizen, it's hard to take some of these organizations to court. It's very expensive, but it is a really necessary part of the process. And so our court systems often become the deciders and help to remedy bad situations. And so Tampa Bay Water Keepers and Center for Biological Diversity are doing some of that work and need resources to be able to work with their professional attorneys or others that they hire for those cases. A few other things on the local level. Talked a little bit about the importance of what we put on our lawns, or whether we have lawns or not. Florida-friendly landscaping is something that is accepted in most communities now, even community associations, where shifting from turf like St. Augustine that requires a lot of water and fertilizer and pesticide to native species, maybe that incorporates food forest, things that we can eat and things that birds and butterflies can eat, butterfly plants and other pollinator species. There's a growing effort in St. Petersburg to increase urban agriculture, to have food forest in parts throughout our state and our city, to address some of the food insecurity that people have in our community. Yesterday, I went to an event at St. Pete Youth Farm in South St. Pete, and that's one of the most extraordinary examples of a true grassroots community organization that is empowering youth through urban agriculture to become really the best versions of themselves. They are doing a huge renovation of their property, which is only about an acre in size, but it's phenomenal what they can accomplish there. They have new beautiful beds, raised beds. They've had tilapia, so they're doing fish farming, and are going to have a big renovation as part of Leadership St. Pete's program this year. So there's really fantastic things that are happening at that organization. I also learned about some things that USF St. Pete is doing. They have a green student fund where they get $1 from every credit hour that students take, and that allows them to do projects. They're looking at some large composters on the campus. Again, some urban agriculture and ways that they can directly use money and involvement from the students to become more sustainable at that campus. So Lisa talked about thinking globally and acting locally. It truly does come down to all of us doing things first at the local level, working in our yards and our neighborhoods and our communities and groups like this church community and family here to set an example and to inspire other people. You know, your neighbors watching you working out in the yard and maybe growing food to help support people in the community. That can encourage or make people curious and want to be part of the solution. But I often get frustrated when I hear about these things that we have to do ourselves, knowing that there are such enormous problems ahead of us. These are things that we can't do alone, and it is critical that there are proactive policies at the city, the municipal, the state, and the federal level to make it, to elevate these type of things. So as important it is for you to have solar on your own homes, if our state is putting the kibosh on solar, it makes it very frustrating, and we're unable to make the progress that we should. So I'm not here to talk about politics, but I would encourage you to have relationships with your elected officials, to speak at City Hall or to make trips up to Tallahassee or DC if you're able to. Having the relationships like Lisa does with me, where she will give me suggestions or tell me about things that are happening in the community. She knows that she can give me a call or that she can visit me in my office. And I will. Yeah. So I would encourage you to get to know your city council member, your county commissioner, your state representative, your state senator. You're feeling like that's a lot of work right now, but start with one of them and share some of your ideas. Share things that you think could be done better or that you would like to see, and then help them accomplish that by writing a letter to the editor or going to a meeting and speaking. It can be so helpful when I'm in a meeting and I have a citizen or an environmental group that's speaking in support of a bill that I have sponsored or is backing up one of my colleagues. We really do want to hear from you, both in our offices but in public settings, to be able to encourage us and to elevate those concerns. And so Lisa did share with me, and I think this is really exciting, there's going to be a climate change conversation here in our local community next month on Tuesday, May 21st at the Palladium. And it's involving some of the big names in our community. Our Mayor Kenneth T. Welch will be there, and Mayor Jane Castor from Tampa. It's going to be professionally facilitated. There's also a local scientist named Dr. Gary Mitchum, who works at USF St. Petersburg on climate change. So all of those community leaders are going to be here talking about climate change and really elevating it, talk about some actionable steps, what they're doing in the two major cities in our region. And I hope that you all can attend. I hope that it sells out and that it gets a lot of coverage because it is something that we need to continue to be focused on. So I feel like I could continue to talk for another hour because we didn't even talk climate change. We talked about lots of other things, but our climate change and our energy usage is affecting our flooding and our sea level rise. I will, yeah, yep. Yeah. Sure. Yes, Pat.
So you know that the lateral lines in St. Pete are falling apart, they're aging infrastructure, and the city did 2 pilot studies to evaluate the extent of the lateral lines failing and found, yes, there is significant decay of the lateral lines, and they're proposing to start phase 1 to begin replacing lateral lines next year. So it's a very slow process that they're moving in. Do you know if there's state funding that could help push them forward in a quicker way to move forward to incentivize homeowners to replace their lateral lines? Lateral lines are the sewer lines from your house to the street that the homeowner's responsible for.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. When I was at the estuary program, we started looking into lateral lines because we know that our wastewater treatment plants can often receive too much water, and our storm systems our storm drains receive a lot of water during rainfall events. And it's not because people are flushing their toilets more, but because there are leaks and there's cracks in some of those, not just the pipes that go under the roads, but the sewer lines that go from your home out to the roadway. Some of those were built with clay that is cracked. Some of them were actually something called Orangeburg pipe, where it's like a waxed cardboard. So you can imagine something like that is going to break down. So there's a lot of that water is seeping out, and so sometimes when we have spills during heavy rain events, it's because we're getting water from those rain events seeping into the pipes and overloading our systems. So the city has committed some money to that. I have not seen a direct line item or an appropriation related to that in Tallahassee, but that's something that I would be certainly open to sponsoring. And that's the type of, I think, strategic projects that we can be doing to improve our water quality. And when you have a study to back up the need, it makes it a lot more compelling.
Hi, I just think you're doing a wonderful job. Thank you. So I have 2 concerns. One's surface water, one's groundwater, and I hope it's just that I'm uninformed. But one regarding surface water, with all the development going on, it seems like a prime opportunity for some exchanges. For instance, why are developers not being forced or required to do stormwater measures to protect, like storm scepters in parking areas? Why do we not have vegetative buffers on every canal, every waterway? Why is every single storm drain that I see this disgusting open transit directly to the bay, whatever waterway? I don't understand why we don't have filters on every one of them. And I don't want to hear about money and budget. It's just, I don't understand it. And then my biggest concern regarding groundwater, and there's nothing we can do, I know, we have an injection well of our wastewater to groundwater, which is a drinking supply. I don't understand. So perhaps you can educate me on how this works.
All right, 2 easy questions there. So first, for treating stormwater, there's different techniques. You can use swales, you can use permeable pavement, you can use rain gardens, which are smaller, kind of decentralized treatment systems. Usually developers will do what is easiest to permit, what they know. Some of this is from the permitting agencies themselves, like the Department of Environmental Protection or the water management districts. There are essentially, models that they can follow that give an idea of how much nitrogen or sediments will be treated through these different systems. And it's kind of a mathematical equation. And if it's easiest to put in a big pond, they're probably gonna do that unless someone is making them do something different, or if the person that is requesting the permit is willing to be more creative and look at some of these things called considered low impact development, LID techniques. With the new stormwater rule, we'll see if that has any changes to it, but sometimes you can tell kind of by the age of the development what the stormwater rules were at the time. And the science has evolved. We've learned that many of those systems are not as efficient as they were promised to be. And maybe conversations with your local government, because they're also kind of the last end who's approving some of these developments. And then the injection wells, that's I have concerns with that because we are putting water into down into the ground, and I think it is more responsible if we're treating that to a level where we can use for irrigation, or that helps to replenish some of our wetlands or some of our river systems. I think it should be used as a resource and treated appropriately rather than injected into the ground. It's very expensive with the hopes of then pulling it up decades later.
Lindsay, I have a question about golf courses. Mm-hmm. And I just read that in the state of Florida, we have over 1,330 golf courses. And one of my students, many, many years ago, did a really cool research project on water runoff from golf courses. And we were amazed at what we found running off these golf courses. The herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers. Are they regulated, or do they just get to dump whatever they want to on and make their golf courses beautiful?
I don't know what the regulatory structure is for golf courses. They do have to be permitted like any type of development. There's a program called through Audubon, not the Audubon, like the bird organization, but there's a certification agency that looks at making improvements in golf course management. And we're trying to get the Feather Sound Golf Course to be part of that program. Something that we have seen also is that reclaimed water, if there's not the infrastructure or the demand for it at the homeowner or business level, often some of that reclaimed water will be sent to golf courses for irrigation, which is a good thing, except that reclaimed water has higher levels of nitrogen in it. So you have to understand that you don't have to use as much fertilizer if you're using reclaimed water. You may not need to use any fertilizer at all. And if a golf course is getting too much water, it may just be kind of flowing through their ponds as a pass-through on its way to being discharged into something like Tampa Bay, so it's kind of defeating the purpose. But the Autobahn, I think it's called like the sanctuary courses. It's something that golf courses can enroll in, but it's not a requirement.
Hi, I live in one of those high rises, and it's a condominium community, and there's a lot of things that are when you ask questions, nobody knows the answers to. And there's two particular problems that I'm having. For one thing, the water is I don't drink the water. It's got so much sediment in it. I'm not really sure how this even works. Like why do people put up with this? But I was wondering how, I don't know what's in the water. Do you know who, like where can I have this tested, or who do you complain to? It's like, it's one of these when you go to management, nobody knows anything. It's like this great void of, we don't know anything and we don't have anything to do with it. And is there like a local water, I mean, should I call the town? I'm not really sure.
I don't think I know the answer to that. I know there are private companies that will come out and test your water because they want to sell you something to filter it. I don't know if that's something that the city does. Have you called their water department?
Well, they don't really, I haven't called the city or anything.
Okay.
I've kind of just used bottled water, and it was pointed out to me you're using thousands of bottles of water, plastic bottles. Yeah, but the water's undrinkable. So I think a lot of people are in this situation in South Florida. You don't have drinkable water, so where do you get water? So there doesn't seem to, no one seems to know anything.
I think even if you have to hire a private company to come and test, the investment in water filtration, when you think of all of the water bottles that you would have to purchase to meet those needs, maybe an initial investment in that can provide cleaner water, reduce the single-use plastic usage.
Yeah, I would think so. I rent this, so it's not a question. I mean, I would purchase, if it was me, I would purchase some kind of a thing, a water filtration system. But I didn't want to, I'll have to continue looking into that. The other thing I wanted to ask about is we, of course, also have charging stations which don't seem to work right. And also nobody knows anything about that. They changed over from the power company to they're now like owned by Gulf or something. Well, nobody knows any. It's almost like it's a plot. Like there's the gas companies have purchased the charging stations and now they don't work, and no one knows anything, and you can't find out anything. And going to management, they don't know anything. And when you talk to other people, they're like, why do you want an electric car? It's like, see, I came from New York, so I feel like I've gone back in time, to the 1960s or something. And it's like, what is going on here? We don't have clean water. The water's undrinkable. Nobody knows anything. Brittany Point. It's a very large, it's on the Bayway Isles, on the Bayway. Yeah, and there's thousands of people there, and it's a great, people, so I don't, I just want to find out where I can find out more information, and nobody knows anything. It's like, they keep sending you from one to the other, and it's all a great void of misinformation and non-information.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can see that would be frustrating.
Thank you. I really appreciate all your amazing work, Lindsay, so thank you. To your question, we just moved to St. Petersburg 6 months ago, and we did hire, actually it was a free check to have the water tested, only to find that there was a huge amount of things in the water that you do not want to ingest, including chlorine, which they use to try to kill all the bacteria. So there are companies that will do the testing for free. Yes, they will try to sell you a water system. We did purchase one because I'm just really conscious about drinking clean water. But there are places you can get it tested, and I'd be happy to share that with you. I just don't know it off the top of my head. One of the things that I'm wondering about is the recyclables. So I notice in downtown St. Pete, a lot of the businesses don't have recycling options. And it seems like we do a great job for residents where there's a recycling bin at every property, but I don't see that downtown, and I'm just curious about that.
I would encourage you to take that up with one of your members of City Council. I think that the business recycling has been something that is slower or to be adopted or not at all with some of the businesses because it is more work and it can be costly. So it would be interesting to see what options they have through the city and, yeah. So Lisa said that some businesses, like Publix or CVS, may have it, but certainly not all. I always think that we need to have a balance between carrots and sticks, incentives, but also regulation. We would have never cleaned our water to the level it is in Tampa Bay if it wasn't for a bill that passed. And so as much as we think that people should do it out of the goodness of their heart or because it's the right thing to do, usually unless there's a reason that they have to or a financial incentive, it's not going to happen.
How many more questions do you want?
A couple more.
I don't have a question, I have a comment to expound on that. Do I need that? Okay, it's not a question, it's just a comment that relates to, of course, our bar district, which is one of our biggest points of the city that usually comes back to how much they can make money. That's usually their incentive. But New Orleans has been working on a program the last couple of years, and they work concurrently with their bar district. So they take all of the glass recyclables and they use them for a couple different things, but the main thing is coastal restoration and grass repatriation. And they take all of the recycled beer bottles and they use it and bag it and put the seagrasses in it, and they've got volunteers that go out and put them along the coastlines and actually are regrowing their coastlines that way and helping protect against current incoming hurricanes. And also we pay a lot of money for sand out of state to fix our coastlines every year. We can do it ourselves and get rid of our glass recycling at the same time. She does it in an outdoor building, so the overhead costs are almost nothing. They have an amazing Instagram if you'd like to look at their.
Yeah, I'd love to look at that.
And it's run by women, which is really cool. So
She said that there's an initiative in New Orleans to recycle glass from bars and to turn it into coastal rebuilding, to turn it into sand and, to help rebuild coastlines with that. Yes?
Is there any initiative or legislation coming down the pike to prevent the use of plastic bags, like in the supermarkets?
So single-use plastics, that's been a hot topic this year. And I didn't really touch on any legislation, but there was a bill that would have preempted local cities and counties from preventing single-use plastics like styrofoam and plastic bags. And that was, all of these bills that are trying to stop you from doing good things usually have some big special interests and some lobbyists behind them. So groups, retail organizations and others were behind that. There was a lot of pushback in the first committee that it went to, and it actually died this year, which was which is a small little bright light. It will probably come back in some form in the future. So for now, communities that have restricted single-use plastics continue to have those ordinances, but we'll always have to be looking out in the future.
Lindsay, is there any talk about bringing back the growth management agency of the state? And then I just wanted to say that the Southwest Florida Water Management District that you mentioned has wonderful free publications on their website. And one of them is a 110-page book that you can ask for. They'll send it to you for free, or you can download the PDF of all of their different publications. And this particular book is about Florida-friendly gardening, which you touched on, which talks about ways that you can take care of your property so that you lessen the impact and the pollution that you bring to our lakes, which then, goes into our bay or the Gulf of Mexico. That's just a great resource. And when we have our lake cleanups, we have those books available and we give them out, and they're great. Thank you.
And I think there was a question in there. What was it?
About the growth management.
Growth management, yes.
Yeah.
If I could leave any legacy in this state, if I could get Growth Management Act back, I would love to do that. I've been focused on some of the bad development bills that we've seen that makes it easier to build in our coastal high hazard area and some of our barrier islands, pointing out just the risk that we face as a state with hurricane evacuation and sea level rise and hurricanes. I would love to see some more comprehensive growth management, and something I will work on, but I will need to have a lot more allies. Yeah. So I appreciate all your time. I just want to end with one verse from the Bible, from Job chapter 12, verses 7 through 10, which says, "But ask the beast, and they will teach you, the birds of the heavens, and they will tell you, or the bushes of the earth, and they will teach you, and the fish of the sea will declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In his hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of all mankind." Thank you.